This cadence breaks students more than any other. Beautiful though, right? That little moment, 4/6 to 5, is called a Phrygian half cadence, and it shows up all over minor key music. But when it comes to actually voicing it, that's where things can get tricky. It's one of those music theory traps. You think you're just connecting two simple chords, but suddenly you're knee-deep in voice leading errors. Tritones, augmented seconds, parallel octaves, parallel fifths, you name it. And half the time, you don't even realize what went wrong. But here's the thing, this cadence isn't just about following rules. It's about understanding why these two chords belong together in the first place. Once you see that, the whole thing clicks, and it'll basically write itself. So, what even is a Phrygian half cadence, and why is it called that if we're not in Phrygian mode? To really understand it, and why it's so tricky, we need to look at where it came from. Remember, composers didn't set out to connect 4/6 to 5. These chords are the result of combining multiple melodies. And to understand that, we have to go back to the Renaissance. In two-part Renaissance music, cadences were all about contrary motion into the final scale degree. One voice steps down, the other steps up, usually in the form of a sixth expanding out to an octave. But composers weren't working in major or minor keys, they were working in modes. Each mode had its own cadence formula, with two voices stepping in opposite directions to the same note. For example, in Ionian, B and D would step outward to an octave C. In Dorian, C and E would step outward to an octave D, and so on. But not all cadences were created equal. Depending on where the half and whole steps occur in each mode, that sixth right before the octave could be a major sixth or a minor sixth. Musicians favored the sound of a major sixth, which occurs naturally in Ionian, Phrygian, and Lydian. Another way to think about it is in these modes, one voice moves to the octave by half step and the other moves by whole step. However, in Dorian, Mixolydian, and Aeolian, the interval right before the octave was a minor sixth, and the two voices both moved by whole step. In order to fix these weaker cadences, musicians began raising the second to last note in these three modes. At first, they did this instinctively, without writing it down. This practice, called musica ficta, eventually led to the concept of sharps, which didn't exist before this. This is also why we raise the leading tone in minor keys. By raising the top note, these modes now had a whole and half step pair, and a major sixth instead of a minor sixth before the octave. So, what does this have to do with the Phrygian half cadence? After all that adjusting, 5 of the 6 modes ended up with cadences that followed the same model. The upper voice moves by half step, and the lower voice moves by whole step. But Phrygian was the odd one out. It already had that major sixth interval, so it didn't need any help. But the half and whole step endings are flipped upside down. That gave it a unique cadence and a sound unlike any of the others. Okay, so now we know where the Phrygian cadence comes from and why it's so different. Let's put that into action with real voice leading into the Phrygian half cadence. A half cadence is any cadence that ends on a 5 chord, so our 2 outer voices are going to move by step to scale degree 5 instead of 1. The bass approaches 5 from 6, which is a half step, and the soprano approaches 5 from 4, which is a whole step. That's the classic Phrygian move. If you remember nothing else about this video, remember this: the outer voices step in opposite directions to scale degree 5. That means we need a chord before the 5 chord that contains both scale degrees 4 and 6. The only chord that makes sense here is the 4/6 chord. So in the key of C minor, that's F minor over A flat, moving to a G major triad. With the outer voices in place, we can work backwards from the final chord to complete the other 2 voices. The 5 chord requires a leading tone, scale degree 7. Let's put that in the tenor and try to figure out how to get there from the previous chord. Can we get there from 6? No. A flat to B natural is an augmented second. Musicians found this interval awkward and difficult to execute easily, so they avoided it. What about 4? Nope, that's a tritone leap. F to B, another big no-no. How about 1? Yes, it's only a half step away. Perfect. So the leading tone must come from scale degree 1. That locks in 3 of our 4 voices. And check this out. We already have a complete 4/6 chord with a root, 5th, and a 3rd on the bottom, and a root position 5 chord with 2 roots and a 3rd. If we were only writing in 3 voices, we could stop here and this would sound great. But we're writing in 4 voices, so what should the 4th voice do? The 5 chord still needs a 5th, which is scale degree 2. We end up with 2 options. Move the alto 1 to 2, which in this voicing means we end up doubling the tenor at the unison on scale degree 1, and then they step in contrary motion away from each other. Or move the alto 4 to 2, which here means the alto doubles the soprano on scale degree 4 in the 1st chord, and then they move in contrary motion to the 5 chord. Both options work great, and your choice should really come down to how you end up getting to that 4/6 chord to begin with. And because both options double one of the other voices at the unison, they actually sound the same. So that's it. That's a Phrygian half cadence. So here's the deal. 3 voices basically write themselves. Your only real decision is what to do with the 4th, and that depends on how you arrived at the 4/6 chord. Now, let's look at some common mistakes. Funky things can happen when you write the 4/6 chord first without considering where things have to go. For instance, here's the 4/6 chord with its 3rd doubled, with the tenor on scale degree 6. Looks fine, right? This is actually unresolvable. Move 6 to 5, parallel octaves with the bass. Move 6 to 7, augmented second. Move 6 to 2, tritone. Doubling scale degree 6 is off limits. When we worked backwards, none of our voices landed on 6, and that's no accident. Now let's see what happens when we take our cadence that does work, but move the voices around. For instance, why does it matter that the soprano moves from 4 to 5? Can't we just rearrange the voices? Not really. In our original version, the soprano and alto form parallel 4ths, which is fine in the upper voices. But if you swap parts, those invert to parallel 5ths, a major mistake. That's why keeping 4 to 5 in the soprano helps you avoid hidden pitfalls. So why do we care so much about this 2-chord moment? Because it's beautiful, expressive, and it's everywhere in minor key music. We just need to remember the DNA of this cadence. One voice steps up to 5, the bass steps down to 5, one voice reaches the leading tone from scale degree 1, and the last voice ends on 2, coming from any note that's not 6. Nail those and your Phrygian half cadences will basically write themselves. And by the way, you can move from a 4/6 to 5 in major keys too, including at cadences. It just doesn't come with the Phrygian title, and it's not nearly as treacherous because there's no risk for augmented seconds or tritones. Okay, I hope you never forget how to voice a Phrygian half cadence again. By the way, this is just one use of the 4/6 chord. It's actually incredibly common and versatile. It can also be part of the champagne progression, act as a relief valve to deflate tension from the 5 chord, or set up motion towards 5 or 5/6. Check out my other chord by chord episodes to see how this one chord can do so many different jobs. See you next time on Dr. Fromm's Music Lab.